which may revolutionize the way we carry out computing in the future. So I'd request Dr. Datta to allow me to share my screen.
Yes, sir.
So I think the screen is already shared. Yeah, thank you. And actually, I am turning on my video for bandwidth related issues. Is this screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Okay. Okay. All right. So the topic of discussion in this lecture is that means we are into the memristor track. So I shall be trying to introduce you the basic concepts and some properties of memristors, and also talk about some of its very interesting applications. Let's first see what really is a memristor. So talking about a memristor, it is a passive circuit element. Now talking about passive circuit elements, what do we means think about? What comes to our mind first? Resistance, which was first invented by George Ohm in 1827. Then inductance, so which was first proposed by Joseph Henry in 1830. And of course, capacitance, which was proposed much earlier in 1745 by Ewald George. Now, very recently in 1971, so a scientist from the Stanford University, Professor Leon Chua, he predicted the presence of a fourth fundamental circuit element called memristor. So the symbol is also shown here. This is the symbol of a memristor, how it will be shown in a circuit diagram, in a circuit. So in addition to resistance, inductance and capacitance, he proposed that we should have another fourth element called memristance or memristor. These are all passive circuit elements. Now he mentioned that this passive circuit element can act as the missing link. See, we already have resistor, capacitor, inductor. So we already are designing and building circuits using them. Now we have this fourth element, memristor. This one, Professor Chua had suggested and named it as the missing link. Let us try to understand why he referred to this as the missing link. Well, this resistor, capacitor, inductor are the three fundamental elements. And talking about the physical parameters, we have voltage, current, charge, and flux. These are the four things we know of. We have studied in our schools and colleges. Now, these three fundamental elements, resistor, inductor, capacitor, they serve to provide some kind of a relationship between these four physical parameters. Like, for example, between voltage and current, you have the so-called Ohm's law, V equal to IR, which is connected by the device resistor. Similarly, between charge and voltage, we have Q equal to CV, that is capacitor. And similarly, between current and flux, we have inductor. Not only that, these cross relationships are also there. Voltage and flux, rate of change of flux is defined as the voltage. Similarly, current and charge, rate of change of charge is defined as the current. Right? But you see, in this diagram, there is a little asymmetry. We do not see any link or any line between charge and flux. Now, you know that nature is symmetrical by its property. Everything in nature is supposed to be symmetrical. So what Leonchua predicted is that between these two elements, there has to be a fourth device called memristor connecting them. Just a second. So this is the memristor. And the relationship between charge and flux is governed by an equation like this. Flux phi equal to membristance. M stands for something called membristance times charge Q. Okay. Now talking about the history of evolution. So as I said, it was in 1971 when Professor Leonchua predicted the existence of a memristor. It is not that he discovered memristor, he fabricated memristor, not that. He mathematically and intuitively predicted the presence of the memristor. And about 37 years later, in 2008, some of the engineers in HP Labs accidentally fabricated a device which exhibited the properties of a memristor. So this finding was also published in the famous journal Nature. So they thought that they were the first to fabricate it, but later on it was found, well, even in the 60s, scientists, they fabricated devices which had properties of memristors, but people did not knew about memristors at that time. So it was not classified as a memristor or a new device. Okay. Subsequently, in 2009, so again in HP Labs, there was a demonstration where how we can fabricate memristor in a high density fashion. So how you can stack this memristor arrays one above the other to provide high density memory. So the prediction was at least 4 to 8 times more memory we can pack inside a chip. Subsequently, well, not only in HP Labs, my next speaker, Shahar Kavatinsky, who will be there, he is one of the pioneers in this area. So you will see from his talk also that they showed that memristor cannot only act as memory, we shall see how, they can also perform some logic. So we can have a device which can store information, which can also carry out some logic operations. This is a really wonderful thing. So we did not knew of any such devices earlier. Subsequently, there are many companies and also research labs and universities. They have started to carry out research in memristors. So if you look into the literature, the number of papers on memristors have increased exponentially over the last few years. So there is a lot of research going on. Now, in terms of the electrical characteristics, if you just plot the VI characteristics, this is a typical characteristic of a resistor. So this is the linear region. Capacitor, inductor, both exhibits an elliptical shaped characteristics. And what I wanted to show you, that for memristor, it shows this kind of a hysteresis loop. So as voltage increases, so you see the current will also increase. At one point, it will suddenly switch, and when you decrease, it will decrease following a different. So there is something called a hysteresis loop, and since it passes through the origin, this is called a pinched hysteresis loop. So any device that has a voltage current characteristic that exhibits something similar to this kind of hysteresis property can be categorized as a memristor. Okay. Now let us see how memristor works. Okay, here we shall be talking about the first effort when this HP Labs first could fabricate one such device. How did they do it? So as I said, this was done in the year 2008. So what they did, they used a material, a titanium dioxide, they used a layer of titanium dioxide. This is titanium dioxide. Let's see. And there was another layer which was doped version of titanium dioxide. One was pure titanium dioxide, which we are calling as undoped. Another was some kind of doping in the titanium dioxide, we are calling it doped. Now the doped region, technically speaking, consisted of oxygen vacancies. Now, as you know, oxygen ions are negative charged. So lack of oxygen vacancy means these are positively charged. So any oxygen vacancy will imply positive charge. Okay. Now what they used? They used one oxide of titanium, typically Ti4O7. So you see, as compared to TiO2, the number of oxygen atoms in this molecule is less than double. TiO2 oxygen is double, right? Ti is 1, O is 2. But here Ti is 4, O is 7. So you can write something like this, TiO2 minus X, a little less than 2. So this is how we are referring to as oxygen vacancy. The amount of oxygen ions here in this oxide is less as compared to pure titanium dioxide. Now the characteristic is that this doped region has relatively low resistance. Its conductance is high, while the undoped region has high resistance. And as you shall see later, as we apply some voltage across the device, this boundary can move either to the right or to the left. Thereby, the width of the doped and undoped regions can vary. So a small animation I'm showing you. Suppose this is a memristor where the top region shows the doped region. The circles indicate oxygen vacancies, and the bottom region is the high resistance part, that is the undoped region. So when you apply a voltage, a positive voltage, because these oxygen vacancies are positively charged, they will be pushed away, because this side I am applying positive, this side is negative. So they will be pushed away. Thereby, the region of doped region will be spreading across the whole device, which means the whole device will now exhibit low resistance because this oxygen vacancy has spread across the entire device. But in contrast, if you apply a negative voltage, like negative here and positive here, reverse bias you can say, then this oxygen vacancy will be pushed towards the top edge. So it will be pushed like this, and we will be having mostly undoped region, which is high resistance. So under this condition, the device will be exhibiting high resistance. This is one property. So if I apply certain voltage across the device, resistance will decrease. If I apply reverse voltage, resistance will increase. So I can control the resistance of the device by applying a voltage across this. And one interesting property is that this resistance change is non-volatile in nature. Which means if I withdraw the voltage, whatever last resistance value was there, that will remain. And because of this non-volatile property, memristor, one of the most important applications of memristor that has been explored is in memory design. You see, you can use a memory to store a bit. Low resistance may mean logic 1, high resistance may mean logic 0. You store something and then you withdraw the power. Because of non-volatile nature, the data will remain, the resistance value will remain. So because you do not need power to store the data, the power consumption of such memory device will also be very low. Okay. Let us come to the HP model, which I had said looks like this. On one side, we have this doped region, this is doped, and on the other side, you have the undoped region. This is pure titanium dioxide, and the doped region is a titanium oxide with some oxygen vacancy. So let's say the whole width of the device is capital D. So doped region has a width of X, so the remaining one will be D minus X. So the left side will be the region with oxygen vacancy, and the right side will be region with uh, pure titanium dioxide, which is much higher resistance. Now the thing is that as we apply a voltage across the device, either plus here, minus here, or minus here and plus here, depending on what you apply, this boundary between the two regions will either move towards the right or move towards the left, which means the value of X will vary depending upon the applied voltage across, also the polarity of the voltage, the magnitude and the polarity of the voltage across the device. Depending on that, the boundary will move, and accordingly the resistance of the device will change. Okay, so this we shall again come back a little later. Now, some of the interesting features of memristor are, first thing is that if you fabricate a memristor like this with two layers like this, so this cross-sectional area is very small. So you can fabricate it in as small as 10 nanometer square. So devices with this dimension 3 nanometer by 3 nanometer has been demonstrated. Because of which, if we are able to design memory systems using memristors, it will allow much greater packing densities. Just to compare, our conventional dynamic RAM which we use in computer systems, it has a cross-sectional area of about 40 nanometer. These are the typical feature sizes, 40 nanometer by 40 nanometer. And flash memory which we use in USB drive and also in solid state drives in the latest laptops, they have features at 20 nanometers. Because of this greater packing density, once we are able to build memory devices out of memristors, we can have a storage density as large as 20 gigabyte per centimeter square. Right? But as per the present technology, the main drawback is that these memristors, let's say built around titanium dioxide, are slower than DRAMs. Typically, let's say 10 times slower. So they cannot replace dynamic RAMs even if they come today. But they are much faster than flash memory devices. So when they come in the commercial scale, the first thing they will do is that they will be replacing flash memories. So then you can have a pen drive that can store 10 to the power 6 GB. That is the maximum which has been projected. Typically 10 to the power 3 GB, which is called petabyte, right? And another very interesting thing about memristor, which I shall also briefly talk about, my subsequent speakers will go into more detail, I'm sure, that memristors can also carry out certain computations in addition to storage. And this computation can be both digital as well as analog, right? Let us look at memristor device again. So we mentioned that it provides a missing link between charge and flux. Okay. So let us look into this memristor as some kind of a time-dependent device. Its behavior changes with time. Let us say that the magnetic flux across the device, phi mt, let's denote it by phi mt. T is the time, it is as a function of time. So with time, the flux changes. And you see, when I apply a voltage, some current is flowing through the device, right? So what is current? Current is nothing but a flow of charge. Some charge is flowing across the device, okay, because of which current is flowing. So this charge is also a function of time, because the same voltage you are not applying at all times. So the amount of charge which is flowing, they can also vary. Now, in that missing link diagram, I mentioned the relationship flux equal to memristance times charge. But when you talk about time variant properties, variations in time, we use the derivative notation, d phi by dq. And if you take the derivative of both the numerator and denominator by time, the rate, d phi dt and dq dt, you see the numerator becomes nothing but voltage, the denominator becomes nothing but current. But again, voltage and current will vary with time. Memristor device, you don't apply the same voltage across it at all times. Same current will not flow at all times. So V by I will change. And that is what is the value of memristance as a function of the amount of charge that is flowing, which means as a function of time. You see, memristance is a ratio of voltage and current, which means it has a unit of resistance. That is why sometimes we refer to a memristor as memristance, which is it has a property of resistance. More specifically, charge dependent resistance. Okay. Now, since voltage V is d phi dt, you can say if you integrate both sides, phi will nothing be like Vt dt. That will be phi, integral of voltage over time. So here, in the present context of memristors, we are not treating flux in the context when we have a magnet, there is a flux around the magnet. We are not treating flux in that way. We are treating flux as the integral of voltage over time. That is much easier to interpret in the present context. Okay? Fine. Now, the modeling of memristor is something which is very important. The idea is, you see, memristor is a device where I have said it has very interesting properties. Suppose I am a researcher, I am trying to build some circuits using memristors. But I do not have the facility to fabricate memristors in my lab. So how do I design and analyze the circuits? The only method is that I can revert to simulation. So there are so many very good circuit simulation tools available like SPICE, even in the CAD tools, Cadence, Synopsys, you have simulation tools available. But for simulation, what we need, you need to model the memristor. You have to have a simulation model of the memristor, which can be fed to the computer, and you can analyze the behavior of the circuit that contains memristors using the simulation model. Now, numerous such simulation models for memristors have been proposed. So I am not going into detail, just a couple of them I shall be talking about very briefly. The first one is the easiest to understand, that's why.
Sir, I just wanted to
Yeah.
ask you one thing here.
Sure.
When you are talking about memristor modeling, one important thing is that how do we model? What kind of data we use? Because we need to model with the real fabricated parameters.
You see, there are two things. You will find that there are some initial efforts where there was some theory developed on memristors, and based on the theory, some memristor model was proposed mathematically. So some examples of this theoretical model are, many of the researchers use this. There are some models called TEAM or VTEAM. These were also proposed by the research group of Shahar Kavatinsky. Okay? And there can be also some actual fabrication. So let us call it physical. Someone actually fabricated some devices and carried out some electrical measurements out of it. How it behaves, if I apply some voltage, how is the current, voltage current relations, and so on. So based on these physical measurements, I can propose a simulation model. So there are two broad categories. Obviously, physical one will be more accurate because they are based on actual fabricated device, right?
Thank you, sir.
But what the theoretical model tries is that they try to match as close as possible to what is physically observed from theoretical considerations. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay, fine. So, first thing about memristor models is that because they will be used in simulation, they must be simple enough. There should not be too much computation involved so that simulating a memristor becomes very time consuming. And at the same time, the model must be sufficiently accurate. Because ultimately I am designing a circuit, right? So it consists of memristors. I'm applying some inputs, I expect some outputs. So the output should be as close as possible to the actual physical thing. When I use real memristors in a circuit, what outputs should I expect, right? Now, the first practical model, as I said earlier, in 2008, the memristor was fabricated in the HP labs. So the first model was based on that. Subsequently, some drawbacks of this model were found and many other models were proposed. But these are all theoretical models. But as I told you, today at present, the trend is to go for physical models of such memristors. And these theoretical models are typically available in SPICE form. So you can directly integrate them into SPICE simulator and simulate them. But the physical models are typically, they are more complicated in terms of computation. So they are typically available in analog Verilog or Verilog A models. There are many simulators which can directly take Verilog A models of components. There you can carry out the simulations. So let us very briefly look at this first and the simplest model which was proposed, linear ion drift model. This was, as I said, the structure of the memristor which was proposed by HP. So here we assume that the physical device has two regions, which already I showed in the diagram. I'll show again in the next slide. One region has low resistance because of oxygen vacancies, and the second region has high resistance. And another thing, so in this model, we say that the oxygen vacancies are moving around. So every charged particle has something called mobility. Let's say the mobility of those ions are mu v. This is the notation we use. So this was our diagram, doped region, undoped region, W and D minus W. So in the linear ion drift model, what we assume is that when we apply a voltage across the device, there is a uniform field that is applied across the device which changes linearly as you go from left to right. And the drift velocity of movement of the charged particle, that means oxygen vacancy will be here, right, in the doped region. They will be uniform. And well, this is a standard equation. I'm not going into the derivation of this. So whenever there is a transport of charged particle, this is called drift diffusion equation. W is the width of the doped region. The left hand side indicates the rate of change of W with time. So as we apply voltage, this boundary will either move right or it will move left. So W will change, right? This mu v is the mobility. R on is the resistance of the device when W is D. That means the entire region is doped. That is R on, and R off is the reverse. When the entire region is undoped, what is the resistance? That is R off. So this WT means can be obtained by integrating this equation. If you integrate with respect to time, W2 will become mu v R on by D is constant. IT, if you integrate IT dt, that is nothing but charge. So QT. Okay. So now if you want to estimate the voltage will be resistance into current. Now resistance modeling, I've already seen how the resistance can be modeled. Resistance of the doped region plus resistance of the undoped region. So you see voltage equal to, this is the resistance multiplied by the current. So R on is the resistance of the doped region. The fraction of the doped region is this. R off is the resistance of the undoped region. Fraction of undoped region is this. So this is the overall resistance of the device. And if you do a simple simplification, you arrive at this. And if you substitute WT from the previous equation we have derived here in the bottom, then we get something like this. So membristance, which is the ratio of Vt and It, this It you can bring on the left hand side. So this is a simple expression for membristance. So in this model, based on the values of mu, Ron, D and the charge flowing, you can estimate the value of membristance. This is how modeling is carried out. But let me tell you very briefly how these physical models work nowadays. So one of the most commonly used such model is called the filament model, where instead of this doped and undoped region, so what it says is that I have this device, this is a two-terminal device, and there is some kind of a filament which is formed between the terminals. And once a filament is formed, there will be the flow of current. Flow of current means resistance will be low. So you see, just pictorially, there are so many charged particles shown by these green circles. So if I set the device, setting the device means I am setting up the filament. Then the charged particles will fill up the gap in between. You see, there is a continuous path from the top to the bottom electrode. And here the resistance will be low. But if I do the reset operation, I apply the reverse voltage, so these charged particles will be repelled, moved away, and there will be a break in continuity. This is the so-called reset state or the high resistance state. So let me also show another diagram. This diagram is clearer. The left one shows the high resistance state, where you see that there is a distinct discontinuity here. The filament is not touching each other. But by applying a suitable voltage, if you move this charged particle towards the bottom, so they get connected and the filament is formed. So when the filament is formed, it will connect top and bottom electrodes, which means the right hand side, this is low resistance mode, and the left hand side is high resistance. Right? So this is how various models have been proposed. Okay, fine. Now, talking of memristor fabrication, since I told you that there are many efforts, many people, many research labs, many fabs, they're trying to fabricate memristors. So even in India, there are a number of efforts which are going on. So there are not only titanium dioxide, various oxide materials, it has been shown that they exhibit memristor kind of properties. So titanium dioxide was one, and today hafnium dioxide is another very popular material which is used. There are other methods, polymeric, resonant tunneling, magnetite, manganite, and there are some alternate devices also, not exactly like a memristor, but they behave similarly, like called spintronics or torque magnetoresisting. These are called magnetic or spin-based device. Okay, so these devices are also being explored in addition to traditional memristors for building this kind of memories. Okay. Now here let me tell you, I am talking about memories. So there is a terminology we use, resistive memory. So why we call them resistive memory? Because we are storing some information in a memristor. This is the symbol of a memristor as resistance value. The resistance can be low resistance, let's call R on. It can be high resistance, let's call R off. Typically, R on represents logic 1, R off indicates logic 0. So we can represent information in this memory as resistance. Not only two values, there are memristors where multiple values of resistance can be stored. Not only the lowest and highest, several intermediate levels can also be stored. So if there are 4 levels, you understand that in a single device I can store 4 states, which is equivalent to 2 bits. So 2 bit of information, low resistance, medium low, medium high, very high. So this can indicate 0, 0, this can indicate 0, 1, this can indicate 1, 0, this can indicate 1, like that. Right? So such devices have also been fabricated. Now, one interesting thing I also mentioned, but I didn't talk about it yet, that we can carry out logic design using memristors. How? Let us look at the memristor transfer characteristics again. So what I showed in that previous diagram, that it looks like a hysteresis curve like this, very smooth. But in practice, when you fabricate a device and measure, you don't get this smooth transition. Rather, you get something like what is shown here. There is a ragged edge here and another ragged edge here. But the point is that if you look at this device, what is this containing? Voltage current characteristics. So you see, when I plot voltage versus current, if it is a straight line, what does that indicate? It indicates resistive behavior, because you know, according to Ohm's law, V equal to IR. The slope of this curve will give you what is the resistance value, right? Now, in this hysteresis curve, you see that there are two distinct regions of the curve. One is this, other is this. This region of the curve, you see slope is very low, which means this is high resistance. And the other one, the sharply changing, this is low resistance. So what does this mean? By changing the voltage, see, if I increase the voltage and I cross this point, the device will suddenly switch from here to here. So from high to low, there will be an abrupt transition. Similarly, in the negative direction, if I go on applying voltages, if I go beyond certain point, from here it will move abruptly to here. So this is the direction we are moving. Right? So when I talk about logic operations, this is the convention which is typically followed. The on resistance or low resistance is treated as logic 1, and the off resistance are treated as logic 0. Not only that, there is another concept. You see, when we talk about a conventional gate, let's say an AND gate. In a conventional gate, what do? We apply inputs as voltages, right? Logic 0, logic 1, whatever voltage you apply, and at the output we measure a voltage. But in many of the logic design methods using memristors, the concept is different. We don't apply the inputs as voltages. Rather, we apply the inputs as initial resistance values on memristors. Suppose there are two memristors, one here, one here. I apply this in the high resistance, I apply this to the low resistance, which means my first one is logic 0, second one is logic 1. So the input to the gate I am applying as resistance values on memristors. Similarly, when the gate operation is completed, the result or the gate output is also obtained as resistance value of some other memristor. This is how it typically works, right? Now this diagram that I've shown here, means I'm showing it in a little more detail. You see, there are certain voltages. So if I apply V open cross it, let's say V clear, then so the arrows are shown in which direction is moving. So from low resistance to high resistance, there will be a transition. Similarly, in the negative direction, if I move the voltage beyond V close, let's say to V set, then there will be a reverse transition. So from high to low. And V cont is any voltage which is more or less in between. Okay. So V cont will not be able to change the state. This is just some notations. Let us see a few things about this set and reset states. So as I said, in the VI characteristic, there are two distinct regions. One is high resistance and low resistance. So the high resistance has some resistance value, low resistance has some resistance value. So a memristor, how good it is in terms of storage of information, it is determined by the R off to R on ratio. So how much is the difference? Typically, it is 100 or more. It can even go up to thousands. So if I see that the R off to R on ratio of a device I fabricated is more than 100, then I can say that, well, this is good. I can use it for storage or logic operations also. So I already mentioned that because of non-volatile nature of resistive storage, you can use these memristors to store digital information. We shall go into a little more detail later. And these devices are called resistive random access memory. In short, RARAM. Right? And I said just now that not only two levels, logic 0 and logic 1, I can have multiple intermediate levels also, depending on the quality of the device I have fabricated. So in general, I can also store analog information. I can continuously store some values between some minimum and some maximum. Later on, when we talk about neuromorphic computing, we shall see that this analog information storage will become important, right? And how many levels of discrete values you can store, that is determined by something called bit resolution. It can be 2, 4, 3, 4, it depends. Okay, now let us come to how typically logic operations can be implemented. Well, we shall be talking about two different methods. Both of these methods were proposed by Shahar Kavatinsky in his PhD work. The first one you see, there is something called logical implication. This is the symbol of an imply gate. As you can see, this is a OR gate with a NOT operation on one of the inputs. So this actually implements not P or Q. In terms of the truth table, you see, the truth table will look like this. For all combinations other than 1, 0, the output will be 1. Only for 1, 0 combination where this is 1 and this is 0. So P bar will also be 0. Only then the output will be 0. Otherwise, the output will be 1. Right? Let us see how this material implication can be implemented using memristor. Very simple. This is the circuit. We need two memristors only. We need only two memristors to realize an imply gate. And of course, one resistance. One resistor. So there are two devices, P and Q, memristor devices, and there is a resistance RG. This RG is selected such that it lies between the on and off resistances of the memristor. You see, logically speaking, I am speaking logically. Suppose I have this logical implication operation. So one input is P, other is Q, and the output is supposed to be the imply operation. Now, this P and Q are the two memristors. The inputs that you are applying, we would be setting the two memristors to the corresponding resistance states. And the output is also obtained on Q. The state of Q will change. Because this P contains only one of the inputs, it is called input memristor, and Q contains the input as well as the final output. That is why this is called Watt memristor. And these are just voltage drivers. We are applying VCON here. VCON, you recall, it's an intermediate voltage which cannot change the state. And Vset is a voltage which can change the memristor to the R on state. Let's take a couple of examples. Suppose we apply, let's say 0, 0. This is 0, this is 0. This means both are high resistance. Both are high resistance means out here there is very little current flowing. So here the voltage will be very close to ground. So if you look at the Q memristor, there will be a high voltage across it. On one side you have VSET, other side you have ground. So this will change the state of the memory state from 0 to 1, from R off to R on. So if I apply 0, 0, output will be 1. Let's take another case. Suppose we have 1 and 0. So you see 1 means what? This P is already conducting, but Q is not conducting. P is already conducting, right? So I have applied Vcon. Vcon and conducting means here you will get some voltage which is very close to Vcon, because you have a low resistance RG connected here. You think of Q. Q, on one side you have VSET, other side you have Vcon. So across the device you have a voltage VSET minus Vcon. This is not sufficient to change the state. So it will remain at 0 it will remain at 0. So you see, if you look at the truth table before, 1, 0, it will remain at 0. For all other cases, there will be a conducting path, the output memristor will change state. Simple. Just two memristors and a resistance we can imply. Let's look at another method. This is called magic. Magic is a short form for memristor aided logic. Here also the inputs are set as resistive state of the memristor, and just one thing, there is a separate memristor called output memristor. For implementing a 2-input gate, you need 3 memristors total. So the idea is that for AND and OR gate operations, the output memristor must be set to logic 0 initially. You have to initialize it 0 before the gate operation. But for negative gate operation like NOT, NAND and NOR, you have to initialize it to 1. Then you have to apply some kind of an operating voltage VO across the memristor, which is approximately half the maximum. Let's see how it works. Now one thing, I am showing the NOR gate operation using memristor. This is what I am showing, a NOR gate. So there are 2 inputs, in 1 and in 2. The output is out. So you know that the truth table of a NOR gate is like this. And memristor realization is just like this. There are 3 memristors. This in 1 and this will be in 2, sorry, this will be in 2. In 1 and in 2 are the input memristors and out is the output memristor. Let's look at it one. See, means as I told you that for a negative gate, the output memristor will be initialized to 1. So first it is 1 means low resistance. So when 0, 0, let's take the first one, 0, 0, both are 0 and 0, which means high resistance, no current is flowing. So no current is flowing means the output memristor will not change its state, because a memristor can change state only when there is a flow of current. But let's say I apply 0 and 1. So at least one of the memristor is conducting. So I have applied a voltage V0, so this is connected now. So there will be a current flowing, right? Like this. And the value of V0 is such that the flow of this current will change this 1 to 0, because you see this current is flowing in the reverse bias direction. This solid line means the end where the doped region is there. The black means the doped region, so it is the reverse. So whenever the current flows, the current will flow for all these 3 cases when one of the input memristors are conducting. So it will change the output memristor to 1 to 0. So NOR operation will be carried out. Now, well, I have not talked about crossbar as yet. Crossbar means, you see, you can have several columns and several rows where you can fabricate these memristor devices at the junctions. Like this. Just I have shown just only 3 such memristors. If you look at the polarities, here you see all the memristors have their doped region on top. So for fabrication also you can do it very uniformly. So if you connect them like this, you have exactly the circuit you need to do or carry out NOR operation. You see, this in1, in2 will be this. The input for V0 you can apply here. This Vg is mentioned. So it goes to the doped region. You see, it goes to the doped region. And the output memristors doped region is connected to ground. You see, doped region is connected to ground. So in a memristor, if you have this, in a crossbar, if you have such memristors, you can apply these voltages V0 and ground to the columns, and we can have this NOT operation carried out directly on the crossbar. So NOT is a single input NOT, so NOT can also be done. NOT and NOT can be directly mapped. So let's take a slightly bigger example. So you see here I am showing a crossbar with many memristors. There are multiple rows. In the first row you see, this is S. Let's say I apply an input A here. This is this. Let's say I apply input A here, B here, and C here. So here in terms of voltages, I shall be applying V0. V0 to all the three. And output, let's say I am taking on this. So output I can take on any memristor. So here I am connecting it to ground. So if I do this, then this operation will be carried out. This is the output memristor TM, which is a NOR of ABC. Similarly, I can carry out some NOR operation on something. Let's say this contains A bar, B bar, C bar. By applying suitable voltages, I can carry out operation. So if I want to initialize a memristor to state 1, I can directly connect it to ground or supply voltage. I connect a voltage out here. This particular memristor will be set. So you see, directly on the crossbar, I can carry out logic operations. Now, what I mean to say is that NOR is a functionally complete operation. If I have the capability of carrying out NOR operations directly on the crossbar, then I can carry out any function in the crossbar. That is the beauty. So I have already said, because memristors are non-volatile in terms of its storage of resistance values, this crossbar can be used as memory. In addition, I can also use it as for computing logic operations. So let us very briefly talk about crossbar here. So already we have introduced. Crossbar is a very compact way of fabricating or laying out memristors. So as I showed, it consists of an array of perpendicular nanowires. So there are vertical wires and horizontal. They are not touching, they are in two different levels. And at every junction, you connect a switch, which is a memristor, which connects every row and column. So when the switch is conducting, suppose I connect a memristor here and the switch is conducting, then this particular row and this particular column will be electrically connected. There can be a current flow. Okay, that is the idea. So pictorially, let us show. Pictorially, it looks like this. On the left, I am showing a very simple 3x3 crossbar, where you see that the several memristors are there, 9 memristors. So by applying suitable voltages in the row and column, you can store any values there, which means it can act as memory. Similarly, by applying that V0 and ground, I can carry out logic operations. So see here, another thing is that if I apply V0 here, if I apply V0 here, if I apply ground here, then normally NOR operation will be carried out. There is a parallelism of operation possible. So I can carry out all these 3 NOR operations in parallel, because I'm applying the same voltages to AC as well as BD as well as G1, G2, right? But if I do not want that some operation not to be performed, then I can apply some isolation voltage on the corresponding row. If I apply V iso, then this NOR operation will not be carried out. The first two will be carried out. And another good thing about memristor is that you can stack them one above the other. Like in the diagram shown here, the memristor arrays can be stacked one above the other. And because they consume very little power, there will be no heat generated, and you can have very high capacity memory. Okay. Now, the interesting thing is that now we have a technology. We have a memristor crossbar. Let's say we have a memristor crossbar. So here we can store some information when we are using it as a conventional memory, resistive RAM. So we can store information. But by applying those voltage, let's say for magic, when we apply those V0 and ground and V isolation voltages selectively, then I can directly carry out some operations on the crossbar. So you see, I am carrying out some logic operations directly on the memory. This is called in-memory computing. I am carrying out some computing inside the memory itself. This is a clear departure from the so-called von Neumann model of computing, which says that processor is separate, memory is separate. But here we are saying that both are being done, processing and memory function are done in the same unit. So by this, there is potential for massive parallelism. There is something called sneak path, I shall very briefly talk about, which has to be resolved. But let us look into this in the next slide with the help of a diagram. You see, this is the so-called von Neumann model of computation, where there is a processor, the CPU, there's a memory where all instructions and data are stored, and CPU fetches instruction, fetches data, does computation and stores it back. So you see this pipe, whatever this pipe is shown, there is a lot of data movement through this pipe. And the speed of this pipe becomes the overall bottleneck as to how fast we can carry out computing. But now in this alternate paradigm, we are talking of in-memory computing, where you're saying that, well, there is a CPU. CPU can always execute instruction conventionally. But in addition, we have a different kind of a memory where we can have storage as well as computing. Which means the CPU may be doing something else, but memory internally can be carrying out some computation in parallel. Such kind of parallelism is very much possible. Okay. Now, one thing I talked about in the previous slide, I mentioned sneak path. There is a problem with crossbar, which is called sneak path. Let us very briefly see what is the sneak path. Sneak path essentially means, let us first see the definition, then we'll illustrate, that unwanted current flow between 2 points, which we do not want. You see, let us look at this example crossbar. So I am not showing the memristor convention, I am showing them a circle. The circle means those are the memristors. Okay. Now suppose I am using it as a memory. Now I can sometimes want to read the value of the memory. Let's say I want to read the value of this cell. So what do I do? One method is I can apply a voltage to the corresponding row, and to the corresponding column I can measure the current. How I do? I can connect a small resistance RL and I can measure the voltage drop across it. So if this cell is at a high resistance, very small current will flow and V0 will be close to ground. But if it is in a conducting state, then high current will flow and this V0 will be a high voltage. So just by measuring V0, I can say whether the cell Cij is 0 or 1. Very simple, right? But now let us see. Now what might happen? Let's say this cell is in the 0 state. 0 state means high resistance state, which means through this green path, normally there should be very small current flowing. Very small current should flow, okay? So that the V0 voltage should be close to 0 and you can conclude that Cij value is 0, okay? But think of a situation, let's say some of the neighboring memristors. Let's say this memristor is in state 1 this memristor is in state 1 and this memristor also in state 1, this one. Just imagine, whenever a memristor is in state 1, it connects the corresponding row and column. There can be a current flow between row and column. It electrically connects them. So you see, you are applying this voltage here and measuring the current here, expecting to know the state of the Cij. But because of the state of this neighboring cell, what might happen? This Vg, this voltage, might follow a path like this. Because this cell is 1, there will be a conducting path. Row and column will get conducted. So there will be a path up to here. Again, this is 1, row and column will be conducted. Again, there is a path. This is also 1, row and column will be conducted. So you see, there is a parallel high current flowing path which is formed. This is called the sneak path. So actually you are expecting very low current to be flowing, but what will happen is that you will see that a very high current is flowing. So you will be erroneously reading the content of the cell to 1. Right? This is the so-called sneak path problem.
So just a question here.
Yes. Yes.
Can a 1T1er model mitigate this problem?
Yes, I shall come to that. So some of the possible solutions, there are several solutions which have been proposed to the sneak path problem. One of the more commonly used solution is that the crossbar cells, let us compromise on the packing density. We are adding some additional devices along with every memristor. They can be diodes, they can be transistors. There are several such configurations, as Dr. Datta mentioned, 1T1R. There can be 1T-KR. 1T1R means with every resistance, means with every memristor, I am using one transistor. 1T-KR means with a set of K memristors, I use one transistor. Okay. So let me show you the diagram of a typical 1T1R array, so you will understand how it works. So 1T1R crossbar will look like this. So you see, these are the memristors, okay? And we have connected one MOS transistor alongside each. See, in the normal crossbar, there are no MOS transistors. So you apply voltages in rows and columns and some current will be flowing. But now you see, unless I turn on this transistor, unless I apply a high voltage here, if I apply high voltage here, the gate of this transistor will get high voltage. Then only the source and drain will be conducting. Then only the current flowing path will be formed. So only the cells that I want to be accessed, those transistors I shall be selectively turning on. All other transistors will be off. Therefore, no sneak path will be possible. Because unless there are current flowing path, the sneak path will not happen, right? So here I am selectively making one of the memristors conducting, because of which I am mitigating or I am removing the sneak path problem. Is this clear?
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, please.
So these transistors and memristor both are operate in different voltage. So if there is a small leakage in transistor, then it can affect the value of value that we are reading through memristors.
See, normally in terms of layout, I don't have a slide diagram here. These memristors and transistors are fabricated in two different layers. First, you fabricate the transistor. On top of the gate, so-called gate of the transistor, you fabricate the memristor. That is how it's fabricated. And you talked about different voltages. Yes, how much voltage you will be applying to this transistor so that the memristor can be set and reset properly, those have to be determined beforehand through simulation and of course actually fabricating and actually testing them out, electrical testing. That is very important. You are absolutely right. So unless you are able to apply the voltages properly to the transistors, so you will not be able to properly set and reset the memristors, right? Because the adequate amount of current should flow through the memristor device to change it from low resistance to high resistance and vice versa. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Okay. Now, lastly, I shall very briefly talk about one very interesting application of memristor, where we are using the memristor as an analog device. That means we are not storing two discrete states, low and high. We can continuously store many levels, many intermediate values. Neuromorphic computing. You see, today we are talking about neural networks almost everywhere. Now here we are talking about a technology which can carry out this neural network operations or neuromorphic computing extremely efficiently. Let us see how. Let us see. So the idea is that here again we are using a memristor crossbar. That same memristor crossbar can be used to implement the operations that are required in a neural network. Now we shall explain, because you see in a typical neural network what is done, we apply some inputs and we get some outputs. Normally, let's say the input, if it is a vector v, and the operation of the neural network is expressed by a matrix, let's call it M. So v is multiplied by M, and whatever you get, let's say x, this x comes out of it. This is how a neural network typically works. So we want to do something similar, right, using memristors. So the basic idea is that this v, whatever you are trying to apply as input, they are applied as analog voltages along the rows. So the next slide I shall be showing the detailed diagram. So we are applying this v as actual analog voltages. And you see, we are trying to multiply v by a matrix M. What is this matrix? Matrix is nothing but the memristors that we have in the crossbar. And each memristor will be having some resistance or some conductance. Conductance is the reciprocal of resistance. So 1 by R is G, conductance. So the memristors in the crossbar, we are initializing beforehand with resistance values that are consistent with this matrix M. So whatever we want to multiply with. And we apply voltages, memristors are already set with the values, and we simply measure the currents along the columns. So whatever current values we are measuring, that is X. Direct, we don't have to do any computation at all. For a vector matrix multiplication, normally we have to carry out so many computations, multiplication, addition, and so on. But here, in a single cycle, I apply some voltages, I initialize the memristor, apply some voltages, I directly get the currents. That is equivalent to the product of the voltage and the matrix. So in the next slide, let's go to it. So on the right is a typical memory crossbar, which has memristor crossbar, which has been fabricated, is shown. So the central part is the actual crossbar, and the other ones are the row and column connections. Those are copper. Okay, now look at this diagram on the left. In this crossbar, we are applying these voltages V1, V2 to Vn as direct voltages. These are analog voltages. They can be 1.2 volt, 2.5 volts, 0.8 volt, whatever. And every memristor we are initializing with some resistance value. Let's say the ijth memristor, the resistance is Rij, and we define the conductance of a device as the reciprocal of the resistance. So here, for convenience, I am showing the conductance values, G11, G12, and so on. So actually G11 is 1 by R11. Okay. Now see what happens. It is very simple to understand also. You think of this current. What will be this current? This V1, some current will be flowing through G11. V2 is Vn, this V1 G11, V2 G21, Vn Gnn. The sum of all the currents will be I1. So Ik in general will be summation of all those V and G products. So when I get all the I's together, I have actually carried out this vector matrix multiplication, vector multiplied by the conductance matrix. This is what is done in a single step. And that is the beauty of using memristors in neuromorphic computing. Another very common application of neural network is to use it as some kind of a classifier. Like in the second slide, I'm just very briefly indicating it. See here the inputs you are applying on the left. You see, for the purpose of applying analog voltages, typically some digital to analog converters are connected. So this diagram also shows the DA converters. And if the weighted sum of the currents exceeds some threshold, you say it belongs to class 1, or it belongs to class 2, or it belongs to class 1. It is very simple. At every column, you use some voltage comparators. So in the comparators, there is a plus input, a minus input. So one of the thing is coming from this top, the current is flowing, and the other one you are putting some reference, IF. So depending on the values of this, if it is greater, the output will be 0. If it is less, the output will be 1, something like that. So you can identify to which class these inputs that you are applying belong to. So here we are using the same kind of a crossbar with neuromorphic computing as a neuromorphic classifier. In general, you can have many such neuromorphic arrays connected one after the other, because you can have a multi-stage neural network in general, 2-stage, 3-stage, there can be hidden layers. So you can directly implement them using clusters. Okay. Now one thing I didn't tell you, that in general when you carry out vector matrix multiplication, some of the coefficients can be also negative. But here there is no way I can put some negative resistance values, right? So all are positive. So currents will only get added. So to handle negative coefficients, a very this interesting trick is used. Instead of one, we use 2 such memristor arrays. And the final output that you are taking, we are subtracting whatever is coming from this, let's say I plus, and whatever is coming out of this I minus, we are actually generating I plus minus I minus. So for some of the elements of the matrix, if I want negative weight, I initialize them in such a way that the value becomes negative. I minus, this will have a high, let's say G22 here and G22 here. I want it to be negative. So here the value of G22 I can set to 1, and here I can set it to 3. So 1 minus 3 will become minus 2. So the weight will become negative. Okay. So this handling negative coefficient is simple, but the problem is that the hardware requirement gets doubled. You need 2 such memristor arrays. So in our subsequent talks today, I'm sure we'll be getting to know much more detail about these things. So I have tried to give you only a very brief introduction to the problem and these interesting applications people have been talking about. So to conclude, you see here, let me talk about a few things. Memristor holds great promise. So we are saying that we can have a 1 petabyte. Petabyte means 1000 gigabyte pen drive tomorrow. See, we have been hearing this for several years, but still that pen drive has not come to the market. There are several fabrication challenges. researchers are working on these and trying to find out solutions to this. You see, there are a lot of variabilities. Like if on the same chip, I fabricate 10 memristors, the electrical properties of these 10 memristors can be significantly different. Not just 5% or 10%. It can be 30%, 40% different. That is a big challenge which people are still working on. And once they are rectified, you can have very high capacity memory systems. So today, memristors cannot challenge DRAM, but they can definitely overcome or means overtake performance of the so-called flash memory devices. And in-memory computing architectures, this is also a very interesting area of research today. To mitigate processor memory bottleneck, which I had talked about, the maximum speed with which you can move data between processor and memory. So for in-memory computing, you need not have to move any data. Everything is happening inside memory. And as I told you, many realistic memristor models are available today, which even a few years back, it was not easily available. So the researchers had to rely on one of the theoretical models. So because these are available, so the researchers can evaluate design much more accurately through simulation. So I conclude by telling that this can be a very interesting area for pursuing research. So 2 of my PhD students are doing on this. So I'm sure many other people in different corners of the country are doing the same. And just to show you a very small list of references, this list is by no means complete, but the reason I wanted to show you, you see there are so many pioneering work by Shahar. So you will be hearing from him in the next talk. So just whatever confusion you are having, please clarify them from him. So with this, I have come to the end of my talk. Maybe we have time for some questions.
Yes, thank you very much, sir, for this very nice introduction and very easy to follow introduction. I believe our participants have at least followed what is memristors and what we can do using that. So let us now have some questions. Questions from audience?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Sir, thank you, sir. It is a wonderful talk. Really, we enjoyed it. And sir, I have few questions. That is, it is high density design, but what about performance, sir? Any like speed, power, like that?
Power is almost close to zero. As I told you, you change the state of the memristor, then withdraw the power. Still, it will remain. So in terms of power, it is much less power consuming than conventional CMOS technology.
Okay.
See,
so in terms of speed, yeah, yes, sir. Please, sir. Yes.
In terms of speed, you see, in terms of the logic operations, see, still, as I told you, the way the logic operations are computed, I talked about 2 methods, right? Imply and also magic.
Yes.
So both of them are relying on storing some data in the memristor, right?
Yes.
So the gate operation, the result is getting stored in memristor. So basically, implicitly, we are doing some memory read and memory write operations. And as I already told you, that the access time of the fastest memristors built today, they are now becoming somewhat comparable to dynamic RAM, still a little slower, but they are not competing with CMOS speed. The processors are built using CMOS, right? They are much, much faster. But you imagine, now you can have a very large memory where there can be 1 million things going on in parallel in memory computing. That kind of possibilities are there. But if you talk about speed, yes, they are not competing with CMOS. CMOS is much, much faster.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, and one more thing, from where we can get these model files? If we want to perform a research, from where we can get this memristor model file?
Model files, one source I can tell. See, this team and vteam are freely available. If you search for team and vteam, they are freely available.
Okay. Sir.
And regarding the physical models, I can give you one reference. Many others are there. There is something called Stanford model. if you search with Stanford model of memristor, you will be taken to a website from where you can download some versions. Now, unfortunately, what is happening, some of the very recent researches, fabrication that are carried out, they are very proprietary. The persons who are fabricating, they do not want to share their data with everybody. So whatever they are sharing are very old data. So means, as a researcher from a poor country, means we don't have any alternative. We have to live with that. We have to get what best is available. And
yes, yes, sir. Yes, yes. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Any other question? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, Frank.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the talk, sir. Very interesting talk, sir. Sir, at the last, you have talked about the fabrication issues, sir, of the memristor. There, sir, you have pointed out like it is very difficult. If I'm getting this right, very difficult like to fabricate the memristor will show the same characteristic. Can we take that as the advantage of maybe using that in PUF and also physical and global function?
Yeah, PUF is a, you see, PUF, see, I have not talked about cryptographic aspect here. For the sake of the audience, PUF is the short form for physically unclonable function.
Yes, sir.
Physically unclonable function is used very widely in cryptography. Say I am designing a chip which cannot be copied, which cannot be cloned. So if I put a PUF inside, it can be so. But because of the variability in memristors, there are many researches where people are already building PUFs using memristors. This variability, as Frank has correctly said, can be thought of as an advantage in such applications. You're right, absolutely right.
Thank you, sir.
Any other question? Okay, if there is no other question, I would like to ask one small question, sir, here. That, as you said rightly, that we are talking about this memristor for a long time, since 2008, and we are now in 2021. There are small chips that some of the labs have fabricated. Some industry are also looking for building such kind of chip. But the device-to-device variability and cycle-to-cycle variability is so much that they still are not able to come to a point where they can commercialize it to a large scale. So what do you think about this?
See, these efforts are going on in a number of places. Like I would like to talk about Stanford University, where very significant research is going on in this area over a number of years. And they have claimed to have fabricated devices which have very good characteristics. And they are collaborating with industries. But as I said, due to non-disclosure agreements, they will not disclose anything about those devices. But there is still hope, because if there are no hope, no one from those leading institutions would not be pursuing research in these areas.
Definitely.
A lot of research going. And another thing I would like to tell you, I have come across some papers where, let's say, I'm using a crossbar for neuromorphic computing. So I have a training set. Based on that, I'm training my neural network. So I'm training my crossbar. So even if there are variabilities, the training will automatically absorb that. The training will be such that in spite of the variabilities, my network will be correctly trained. So what I mean to say is that if I have two such networks side by side, I am training them with the same training set, they will not be trained identically. Depending on the characteristics of the memristors in the two crossbars, the value of Gij will be different. But they can adapt to the variability automatically. There are applications where you can use.
Thank you very much, sir, for this talk. Is there any other question?
There is one query, I think, in the chat box. How do I see? Yeah. d phi dq equal to m. Does this two numerator denominator factors contribute to the variability of electric? Dr. Lahiri, exactly not. What I'm trying to say is that these devices are not very easy to fabricate because of the very small sizes and the very special materials that we need for the fabrication. So even if we fabricate two devices side by side, then if you measure, you'll see that the electrical properties are varying by 20% or 30%. That is why I mean to say. Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you, sir. And thank you, sir. What is the impact of temperature on membristance, if any?
Temperature on membristance.
Yeah, because resistance generally has it changes with temperature. Is there any impact of?
Similar thing will happen. Similar effect will be there.
Okay.
See,
Thank you, sir.
means as we increase the temperature, the mobility of the movement of the ions inside a device increases.
Okay.
That same thing will happen for these devices also.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, if there is no further questions, then I will thank Professor Sengupta for sharing his knowledge in this regard. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
With this, we have come to the end of session 1 of day 5 of this FDP. Our next session will start from 11:45, and as Professor Sengupta said, that we will be listening from horse's mouth in the next session, where Dr. Shahar Kavatinsky will be talking about in-memory computing in more detail. So I would request all of you to join sharp at 11:45, or rather 2 minutes before, such that we can start the session and listen from Shahar's. Thank you so much.